time we helped him buy a truck so he could find a job. We were hopeful that he would find a job and get on with life, but he was 2 weeks into a new part-time job when one early morning he decided to make a trip to the local ER. He used his Crohn's disease as an excuse to get some pain medications. The nurse there told him that he would need a driver to get him home because he was under the influence, but he didn't want us to know what he was up to. He certainly wasn't going to call us for a ride. So he ignored the nurse, hopped in his truck, and was picked up about a block away from the hospital by the local cops, and once again incarcerated for driving under the influence. He was there again for several months. Like I said, the timeline's become very blurred. But he gets out of jail that time and moves back to Westfield and lands a job that he loves and is very good at this time. And so we're so hopeful. He's making good money, and we're hopeful that this is what he needs to gain the confidence and the skill that will help him overcome his addiction. But eventually I realized he's not paying his bills, even though he's constantly broke. And one day I find a dirty spoon and some other paraphernalia in his room. I made a desperate call to his probation officer because I really wanted Jake in jail. I preferred to have him in jail than have him overdose. I didn't hear back from his probation officer, but he must have realized it was a serious situation because a few days later he showed up at Jake's house and tested him. And of course, Jake tested positive and was hauled back to jail. Again, he was there for several months, and it was after this time that Jake decided to put himself in a 14-month Christian-based program. This was the longest he'd ever put into his recovery, and we were really, really grateful and hopeful that that was the end of it. But he put in 13 months and left the program and decided to go back to York to live in a sober house. Now, by now, I'm sure you've noticed the recurring theme here is jail. And like as I said, there were many times that I didn't mention that I had to visit my son in jail. It's really difficult as a mom, as a parent, to tell you how selfishly relieved I felt those times he was in jail. I knew he was clean. He was being given food and shelter. I knew I could visit him twice a week. There was no contact, no hello, hug, or goodbye kiss on the cheek. But I knew he was relatively safe. Yeah, we missed a lot of holidays, a lot of Christmases and birthdays and special occasions. But I wasn't waiting for that dreaded call from the ER that my son had overdosed, or worse yet, a call from the coroner. Even now, 6 years into his addiction, something still seems so surreal. A parent should never have to hear their child say, Mom, I had a gun held to my head yesterday. Or take a call from their son with him crying hysterically that he had witnessed a friend overdose and die beside him in the backseat of a car. Or say nonchalantly, it's okay, Mom, it's happened before. This right after I watched him have a drug-related seizure. You may be wondering how Jake is doing today. As far as I know, he is still clean. He's living in York. He most recently made the decision to move from a sober house into a more structured halfway house because he realized he was being tempted by little things that most of you at the age of 23 or 24 will take for granted, like just trying to maintain a relationship with a girlfriend, sitting down and enjoying a beer and watching a football game on a weekend with your friends, because these are the things that trip him up and put him on a slippery slope. So I'm glad he made that decision. But he has made some forever choices that will have forever consequences. Jake still continues to battle his addiction. He's on probation in 2 different counties with multiple fines to pay, and he fears being arrested if he falls behind on those payments. He still owes Tioga County Prison for room and board. Believe it or not, prison is not free. His license was revoked when he pled guilty to a drug-related charge. He has to pay for rent, food, and public transportation, which is difficult because he can't find more than a minimum wage job with his conviction record. He's been blacklisted from doctors and hospitals, which is pretty dangerous for someone with a lifelong disease like Crohn's. And he's lost the complete trust of his family. And this is the hardest part for me because I love Jake with all my heart. But I still wonder when he calls and asks for money, is this my son Jake, who's struggling, paying bills on a minimum wage job and needs a little help? Or is this addict Jake who needs money to shoot heroin into his arm? If he calls and he's acting a little too happy or too silly, I wonder if this is my son Jake who's sober and clean and enjoying life, or is this addict Jake who's high and thinks I won't notice? And these are questions we'll have to ask every day for the rest of our lives, because every day Jake has to wake up and make the decision to stay clean or to give into that temptation and use again. So I'm going to wrap this up by saying this. Addiction is a forever disease with forever consequences. It doesn't discriminate, and it can happen to you. Just walk away.
Hi, my name is Sherri, and this is our story. I say our story because it's about my nephew, AJ. He just lives about 7 miles up the road from here in a little town called Cowanesque Valley. AJ can't talk today because 8 years ago, AJ took an overdose of oxycodone. I know if he could talk today that he would tell you never to try drugs. Even though it's fun to start with, it takes control of your life. This drug will control you when you're hooked on it. You will do whatever it takes to get more. You will lie, you'll steal from your own family, and it will rip their hearts out. AJ was a fun-loving young man. He was very smart in math. When he was about 9 years old, he transferred his savings account from one bank to another because it paid 0.5% more interest. And I remember when he was a teenager, he knew Wall Street terms. He was describing different terms of investments to one of my cousins who was learning about it in college. She was shocked that he understood so much. He had so much potential. He dreamed of owning his own business or being a banker. AJ was a people person. He worked for my husband and I in our business. If my husband and I went on vacation, we knew we could count on AJ to work whatever hours we needed him to do. He was so responsible. He loved riding four-wheelers and snowmobiles. He was always with my husband. They were either tinkering on a machine or out riding one. In January 2007, AJ OD'd on oxycodone. The doctors gave him no hope. One doctor did say if AJ lived, he would be a vegetable. For months, he was just that. He had no eye contact with us. He just lay there in his bed and stared into space. He was on a feeding tube, among many other machines. He lived the next year of his life in different hospitals. He just laid there, day after day, week after week, month after month. Can you imagine being trapped like that? Now I'm going to take you back to AJ's first experience with the drug. He was hooked on them as soon as he started them. AJ tried everything within him to get off the drug. He tried on his own, failed 3 or 4 times. He went to the hospital for help, and they told him that he wasn't bad enough for help. At that time, the hospitals weren't up on the drug around here. The night of his overdose, AJ's dad called the police on him. He didn't know what else to do. He was desperate. His dad said he would rather see him in jail than in the morgue. AJ's a diabetic, and he was so high that night, he took his insulin shot twice. When the paramedics got him to the hospital, his blood sugar was 23, and normal is between 80 and 120. So the doctors put him in a coma, and he's never fully recovered. He needs 24/7 care. We feed him, shower him, dress him, give him his shots, whatever he needs. We have to do it for him. AJ can stand on his own now. He can take a few steps. He goes very slow. He does understand sometimes. He can watch TV, and he loves comedies. He can holler and scream now, but he cannot form words yet. The first time I heard him laugh after his OD was, I just heard him in the other room laughing so hard, and I looked to see what was so funny. The movie Dumb and Dumber was on. Now, that wasn't my kind of a movie, but I left it on just to hear him laugh. It was just so good to hear him laugh again. So 8 years of his life are gone. He can never get them back. We're still believing for a full recovery. AJ's dad has been informed of a clinic through Geisinger Medical Center that has some new methods of regenerating the brain. Hopefully we can get him into that soon. It's still going to be a long haul, though. I'm sure AJ would rather be enjoying life. I think he'd much rather be riding his four-wheeler or his snowmobile, among many other things that he enjoyed doing. But now I'd like to ask you to think ahead, maybe 10 years ahead in your life if you could. What will your story be? I bet AJ wishes his is different. And I hope that you will have a wonderful story to tell someday, because you all have the potential. Please don't let drugs ruin your life. Just one night, only one night, can ruin your whole life. Can just strip you from so much. I want you to stop before you try it. Don't put your family or yourself through this. I want you to ask yourself, what will my story be? I'd like to introduce you to AJ today. If AJ could talk today, I know he would tell you it can happen to you, and just walk away. Thank you.